Welcome back to the Tuesday weekend, and we are talking about our phones in the dining room this week. So, can I first put the thought out there that the phone is the primary tool of the Yelper, and for that reason alone, we just should not have them?
Yeah.
All right, we as a society are probably not going to step away from our phones, but studies have shown that even having your phone flat on the table causes a reduction in eye contact between you and your dining partners. Now, taking phones away from guests is tricky. About 5 or 6 years ago, there were a spat of higher end restaurants that tried to ban people from bringing phones into their dining room altogether. And as far as I can tell, they all closed. I don't know if it was the food. There are all sorts of reasons why a dining room could close, but that might be a place to look. There are a couple places nowadays that I've seen that will provide a lockbox for your phones on the table. And if you leave your phone in there the entire time, you get a free dessert or a small discount. And I am sure for the faster turn times that you get back on those tables, the owners did the math and they're absolutely making more money with that idea. But even as far as peer pressure from the other people you are dining with, I've seen one of two things. First, the first one to pull their phone out of their pocket buys everyone around, or everyone stacks their phones in the middle of the table, and the first one to touch theirs buys everyone a drink. I think it is personally better to just keep them off the table, but that's just me.
That's pretty much the same. When I go out to a dinner, I'm sitting with friends and stuff. My phone's out, my phone's sitting face down, just because if I want to talk to someone, I'm going to talk to them. If I'm sitting at a bar by myself, and I mean, my bartender friends are busy and stuff, I'll just be scrolling through stuff while I'm eating.
Sure.
And a lot of times it's something I enjoy is why I go out to restaurants and bars is I end up talking to the people next to me who I've never met before.
Absolutely.
And like my bartender friends, they'll be busy and someone's like, hey, where's a good place to get so-and-so? And it's like, oh, hey, this is Nick. He's a local here. He can tell you. And I'm like, yeah, what do you need? And they're like, okay. And we just go and just start a conversation. Where are you from? Just because it's my habit, like, oh, where are you from? What are you doing here? Then just go from there.
Well, and as I have touched on in previous episodes, the notion of the third place, that's how you help create those third places. That community is by talking to a stranger, by striking a conversation with somebody you have never met before. Because, hey, sure, sometimes it just gets shut off immediately. Sometimes it carries on a little way. You find it's not going anywhere. And all right, sometimes it's an actually interesting engagement. And sure, maybe you don't walk away with a friend, but then you always have that connotation of, I went to this bar. I met a cool person. I might go back and meet another cool person. And
I've got this buddy from Philadelphia who I met here at the local bar. And he comes out every few months because he's a ship's engineer for the Navy. So he comes out to fix stuff. We've got a huge naval yard here in San Diego. I mean, San Diego is basically a naval yard with restaurants and housing. And I just started talking to him. He's like, yeah, I'm in town for about a week. I'm working on ship out here. And it's like, oh, good luck. We'll see you around. He's like, yeah. And then like 3 months later, he's like, oh, good. I was hoping you'd be here. And same guy, sat down. That was like 6 years ago. I see the guy 3-4 times a year when he comes into town, just grab a beer, catch up. And that's just sitting down saying hi to someone in a bar. I mean, that's kind of more of an extreme how you can become friends with someone like that. But the local watering hole here, when I first started going to it, when it first opened, there was a lot of people in the neighborhood I never met who I'm friends with now. And it was at that time a very neighborhood-centric bar. I'm sure, Josh, you know what I mean? Like being from New York and stuff, where everyone goes to that one bar, we're all going to say Sully's on the corner, and that's where everyone's heading out.
Jeez.
The downside is with phones and with a lot of service staff using phones, that has really ebbed away, where I go in and there's not a lot of neighborhood people in there anymore. If there's 1 or 2 in it. It used to be 10 or 12 in there because, and I've asked, I'm like, man, I don't see you out anymore. I'm like, oh no, I go to this place or I go to that place. And I'm like, yeah, the other place, the service isn't that good anymore. The bartenders and servers don't really engage with you. They just kind of, what can I get you? Okay. And walk away. And I've talked about it with former employees from there who talk to the owner still. And the owner's like, it's just not the same anymore. And like, they're like, yeah, because your staff is always on their phone and doesn't pay attention to the guests. And like, I've been in and watched them, and it's just like, they're not really very good. I mean, they're nice, they're personable, but I think half of their serving staff, half the servers who work in that place now are very, very introverted. And you can be an introverted food service person, but you can't just walk up and just kind of stand by the table until they address you to click that switch to get like, oh, I have to talk to them now. I've worked with introverted bartenders and stuff who they won't say a word until the guest says something to them. And a lot of those people are the ones who are constantly glancing down their phones because they do want the social interaction, but they don't want to have the social interaction while they're in front of someone.
Sure.
And I see that a lot. And the ones I see most on their phones are the ones whose service honestly sucks.
Sucks. Yep.
They're just not good at talking to people.
There are service bartending positions.
Yep.
There are banquet bars or nightclubs where it is either loud or busy enough that you're just asking what you want.
Mm-hmm.
You make it, you hand it. That's
Yep.
it. That is the extent of the interaction. You know,
and that's
like,
perfect for those people.
Exactly. There are other spots for a bartender like that really could thrive. A neighborhood bar where it is part of the reason people are coming there is for conversation. If you are milquetoast as a bartender, you are just not going to make very good tips.
Well, yeah.
When I was the chef of Fireside Dining up at Deer Valley, that restaurant is basically a plated buffet. The cooks in their whites stand there by the fireside and actually serve the guests. And I had to frequently remind my younger staff that I do not ever want to see a phone in the dining room. And occasionally it would be bad enough that I would just grab an empty pitcher from the bar, go around, and everybody's phones went into the pitcher and they got it back when I thought it was appropriate. And that usually actually worked to keep phones out of everyone's hands for about a week or so.
And the same thing too, when we were talking about using your phones for recipes and such. I mean, the recipes in a cookbook or in a cocktail book are going to start out with 2 cups of carrots, 4 leeks. Mm-hmm. The recipe online generally starts out with, there was a light frost on a November morn, and then there's like 18 paragraphs of stuff to get on to how to make basically a vucare. It's like, dude, just give me the recipe. I don't need the entire story.
Yes.
I mean, and that's a lot. I've seen a lot of people when they look up a recipe and you see them scrolling, they're trying to get down to the recipe.
Well, and then there's the other extreme that as a manager, I actually think is a little too far, which is, well, there was one banquet I was running, which happened to be the Super Bowl party for the casino. I had another party that Saturday night before. So for the Super Bowl, I had asked for help from other departments. So I got one really just stand-up guy from accounting, Jeff, he's great, and a lady from HR to help. And not long into it, one of my banquet servers was on her phone in the back hallway. And a HR lady saw this, and within minutes, she had gone to her office, printed out, come back, and hung up signs saying this was a no cell phone area and told my staff that they needed to leave their phones in their lockers. I wasn't cool with that, but a big fight with an HR lady, well, actually it would come a little bit later when she asked when she was going to get her half-hour break. Anyway, my banquet captain doesn't want to cause trouble, so she puts her phone in the locker. Super Bowl carries on. Right around halftime, I get a call from my banquet captain's son saying that he had been trying to call her for over an hour. Her parents, an older brother, and her sister were in a terrible car crash, and her father and brother had been killed, and her sister was in the hospital. Honestly, there is not worse news to receive at work. No. She was in absolutely no state to drive, so I ended up sending one of my other servers to take her home. But okay, would anything have been different if she had gotten the call from her son an hour earlier? No, but absolutely yes. She should have gotten that news as soon as she could. Not to mention her son had to go through the added frustration of not being able to deliver this news on the first attempt and had to figure out a way to call me in the first place. So, yeah, I am okay with them in your pocket. A lot of my coworkers have kids that are school age and things happen. So I don't think it's inappropriate to have that ability to be contacted readily accessible, but that is a very different thing from spending a lot of your time on the clock looking at your phone.
100%. Again, I mean, it just comes down more to the individual and not pulling it out of your pocket to check a score, to check this, to check that. You know, you have it on you and treat it more as like a tool rather than an entertainment center when you're at work.
Right.
That's kind of the bottom line. And it trust me, it's frustrating when you're working again and you see your coworkers on the phone and you're just like, dude, what are you doing?
And I can't believe we've gotten this far and haven't talked about our phones as a vehicle for fecal matter. Wash your hands. Guest or employee, bathroom equals wash your hands. Guest phones are gross, but ultimately the number of surfaces a guest's hands can touch is kind of limited. A server touches a lot of things, especially things that can wind up being touched by guests. And cooks touch every plate. So cooks need to double tap. Wash your hands in the bathroom, wash them again in the kitchen after you've put your apron back on. You do not want your restaurant appearing on the news because that's where the outbreak originated, just because you are lazy about washing your hands.
And also take your apron off.
Oh, and take your apron off before you go. Do not wear gloves into the bathroom. No, there's some bad habits there.
When I go on break, I run into a lot of other people in the service industry from different places, hotels and restaurants, because we all have similar time off. And we were talking about how most people won't wash their hands in the restroom unless there's someone else there.
Mm-hmm.
Just, they don't like, oh, kid, and they just walk out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so conditioned to washing my hands after I use the restroom. I do it at home. I constantly wash my hands.
I constantly wash my hands.
I mean, I'm just used to washing my hands. People are like, how many times a day do you wash your hands? And I'm like 40 to 60.
As often as required.
Exactly.
A bunch.
And I know you see this a lot on the podcast too, if you watch a lot, but I do this and touch my face. When you're working on the floor, especially, you are not allowed to touch anything above your neck at all with your hands. You just don't. I don't touch my eyeglasses, anything. Like when I go, if I grab my glasses to take them off, it's like I grab a napkin, take my glasses off, put it back. It's just, you just don't do that, because every time you do that, you have to wash your hands.
You have to wash your hands. If you blow your nose, you have to wash your hands.
Wash your hands. When you see people sneeze and they sneeze like that, they're doing it so that they don't have to wash their hands. Right. And then they still go wash their hands.
And that is actually the best way to sneeze in public, is into the crook of your elbow.
Yes.
Because it really does minimize the spread. And you're doing this. What are you about to do with that hand then? Yeah,
I'm going to shake your drink, stir stuff, put your garnish in.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a restaurant where they called it the chocolate talk, and they did it every couple months, and it was about washing your hands. And this guy would have plates out and like a full dinner set and everything. And he's like, okay, so you did this, you went to the bathroom, then he would take Hershey syrup and like just do this with his hands. Mm-hmm. He's like, okay, so then you pick up the plate and like that you're taking from the kitchen and put it down. He puts it down and there's chocolate on the plate. And then he's like, oh, let's say you're a bartender. And then you grab the glass and he grabs the glass and puts it down and there's chocolate on the glass. Then you shake the drink. I mean, it just showed everything that you touched, where it's like, it was a very physical and very visual reference of, you could see what happens when you don't wash your hands.
Absolutely.
I mean, everyone who worked there, everybody washed their hands all the time. I mean, there'd be a line at the hand sink. You come back and bus tables and there'd be a line of people to wash their hands to go back out to service.
You know, I had made a reference last week to Glitterbug, and it turns out that they are actually one of the companies that I've seen this in a couple of places I've worked in the past, where they come in and essentially do a hand washing demo, but they put essentially an ultraviolet thing on your hands. So then you go and wash them and you put your hands under the ultraviolet and you see how much is still on your hands, how well you wash them. And apparently Glitterbug is the name of one of those companies. So
they're like, when they tell you, hey, wash your hands for 20 seconds, and people think, oh, okay. And it's like, literally it takes forever. 20 seconds takes, you're just like,
exactly. Rinsing your hands for 3 seconds is not washing your hands. I suppose that was an uncompensated pitch for a company here, but I also absolutely endorse what they're trying to do in the world. So there you go. Wash your hands. And I guess my last point on employee phone policy is that if your staff shouldn't have their phone on them as a server or a cook, you shouldn't have your phone in your hand as a manager or a chef. Especially not on the floor. Set the example from the top.
Absolutely. 100%. It's like when I get told you're not allowed to have a cell phone and they immediately ding their cell phone out and start texting. And I'm just like, okay.
Even as a manager, if I needed to use my phone You step around the corner. You don't do it in the guest site.
Yeah, you just don't. And I'll hear my phone buzz on the register and stuff and just be like, yeah, whatever. And when I go back to actually do money or something, I just tap it and it's like, okay, it's nothing. Or it's like, okay, I got to go in the back and call somebody. That's pretty much it. It's like when you guys start, when you and Megs and Glenn, and you start those big long posts and all that, and I don't respond for hours, it's because I'm at work. That's literally, I'll answer is like, oh, where you been? And I'm like, working. You know, I'm not going to text when I'm working.
My mom used to have this just unerring ability to call me at work while I was on the line. And especially if it was a Sunday night about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and my phone starts buzzing, it's like, I can't answer that. I can't even, and she was a time zone behind me. I can't even return her call when I get off of work.
She'll be asleep. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. That's why I had my family I trained my family, do not call me when I'm at work. I will not be able to answer the phone.
Well, we will take another break here, but when we get back, we will continue to look at our phones.